Welcome to North of 48. It is November the 9th, and it's minus 19 degrees Celsius where I am right now, which would be minus 2.2 Fahrenheit. Hope you're having a good week. We're towards the end of it. Remembrance and Armistice Day on Friday. Don't forget that. We honor the ones that have served and fallen. Well, particularly not a fan of war. There are instances where we have to defend ourselves. Speaking of defending ourselves, or they are, it is day 260 of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And things just keep piling up there, and by that I mean bodies. Apparently the Russians have signaled they are leaving the major city of Kherson. And people are saying, it's a trap. They're not going. Well, I know. I would be very careful as well. I'm just saying. But one thing that did happen is they exhumed a mass burial site in Izium, which was recaptured not too long ago. Out of 447 bodies, 30 had marks of severe torture. Several men had been castrated by the Russians and buried. Out of that, there was 215 women, 194 men, 5 children, 22 Ukrainian soldiers. If you remember at the start of the war, President Zelensky of Ukraine said that Ukraine was open to negotiations with Russia in the early months of the war, but they took the option off the table after Russia's atrocities in Ukraine that had made diplomacy with Russia unpalatable to the Ukrainian public. However, President Zelensky has now come out and said, so President Zelensky of Ukraine is calling the conditions for negotiations as such: restoration of territorial integrity, respect for the United Nations, compensation for all damages, punishment of every war criminal, and guarantees that this will never happen again. If I remember right, the United States and Russia both guaranteed to Ukrainian people that after they gave up the nuclear missiles, they would be protected by America and by Russia. How's that working out? So let's talk about the word that everybody's talking about for this war is nuclear. Let's examine what Putin has said. So, the Russian president has made repeated, not-so-subtle references to Russia's nuclear arsenal and his willingness to use it. The first warnings came before Putin sent his troops to the Ukraine. On February 19th, the president personally presided over strategic nuclear exercises, including the launch of ballistic missiles. 5 days later, in his declaration of war, Putin made a point to threaten any outside countries that might hinder or create threats for the country, with such consequences that you have never experienced in your history. So the message was plain: if you interfere, you risk nuclear war. On February 27th, Putin took things a step farther. He announced that he was placing Russia's nuclear forces on high alert in response to economic sanctions imposed on the country and aggressive statements by NATO leaders. It marked the first time either Russia or the U.S. had raised its nuclear alert level since the U.S. did so during the Arab-Israeli Yom Kippur War nearly a half-century ago. In the months since, Putin's warnings have tended to come in the wake of bad news on the battlefield. In a late April speech in St. Petersburg, given as NATO heavy weaponry bolstered the Ukrainian resistance, Putin said, if anyone decides to meddle in ongoing events and create unacceptable strategic threats for Russia, they must know our response will be lightning quick. We have all the instruments for this, ones nobody else can boast of, and we will use them if we have to. In September, after heavy losses in northeast Ukraine, Putin ordered referendums that led to the annexation of 4 regions in southern and eastern Ukraine, and he vowed to defend these territories with all the means at their disposal. For the first time since the war began, Putin turned down the nuclear temperature. This was about last week or 2 weeks ago. In an address to the nation, he insisted he had no intention of employing the nuclear option. The Kremlin never said anything proactively about the possible use of nuclear weapons by Russia, Putin said. We see no need. There is no point in that, neither political nor military. Russia has the world's largest nuclear arsenal with 1,458 strategic warheads deployed on 527 intercontinental ballistic missiles, the ICBMs. They have submarine-launched ballistic missiles and strategic bombers as well as a stockpile of almost 5,000 more warheads. Virtually the entire world is in range of its most advanced ICBMs. Experts don't believe these warheads and long-range delivery systems are relevant to the current situation because we have to focus on Russia's possible use of what are known as tactical nuclear weapons. Tactical is often used to imply that a bomb is smaller or less powerful, but this is misleading. Some tactical warheads in the U.S. arsenal have yields of around 100 kilotons. That's smaller than some of the larger bombs available today, but still massive. The bomb that the U.S. dropped on Hiroshima had a yield of just 15 kilotons. Tactical nuclear weapons are distinguished from the strategic variety, but the difference has less to do with the bombs themselves than how they would be used. Strategic warheads typically refer to those which nations might fire at one another's civilian population centers in the event of an all-out nuclear war. The bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, still the only uses of nuclear weapons in history, were the textbook examples. A tactical weapon, on the other hand, would be used for some specific gain in a war zone. It's basically a weapon that you would use to gain advantage, get some advantage on the battlefield or on the theater of operations, says Pavel Podvig, an expert on Russia's nuclear forces at the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research. In the case of Ukraine, a tactical nuke could be used to destroy an airfield, an enemy tank column, or other large military target. Russia may have 1,000 to 4,000 of these tactical weapons, which are thought of as having a shorter range and carrying lower explosive yields. Again, the lower yield is a relative concept. Tactical nuclear weapons from Russia are believed to be in the range between 10 kilotons to 500 kilotons of TNT. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs were on the low end of that range. So the most important question, and the answer is best understood, about endgames. Repeated battlefield successes have emboldened President Zelensky of Ukraine, and every Russian atrocity has eroded interest among Ukrainians in making any concessions to Moscow. On the other side, Putin is under criticism from Russian hardliners who have supported his special military operation, but want it prosecuted and managed more effectively and with greater ferocity, which they have been doing by trying to destroy Ukraine's infrastructure with their cruise missiles and drones. This criticism often includes people wanting to use nuclear weapons against Ukraine and telling the Kremlin to do it. Both sides, Ukraine and Russia, have no room, for at least now, for a diplomatic solution. That in turn increases the possibility that Putin would resort to the nuclear option. However, he has since, as we said at the start of this, came out and said he won't be using it. He dialed down the rhetoric. He referred to Russia's military doctrine, which states that nuclear weapons must only be deployed defensively. The doctrine guarantees, Putin said, that Russia would use them only to protect its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and to ensure the safety of the Russian people. So, reassuring to hear a softer line, but let's not forget that he annexed some parts of Ukraine and brought into the Russian Federation. What happens if a nuclear power is backed into a corner? Would Putin really allow his military to be defeated on the battlefield without using every weapon at his disposal? Well, let us hope he doesn't. The information that I've just given to you came from the Grid, and you can find it grid.news on the internets. And Tom Nagarski is the global editor, and Joshua Keating, the reporter, and Don Vergano is the science reporter. So I cribbed some of the notes off that article to relay to you, because I did get into a big discussion about nuclear war and Ukraine and Russia over the weekend. So right now we have the, if you notice, the right wing and some of the left wing, in the States anyways, are saying that let's go to peace negotiations. We should always go to peace negotiations as far as I'm concerned. However, it's kind of funny now with Ukraine pushing the Russians back that we get this rhetoric, well, we better stop sending money to Ukraine or stop sending weapons. No, I think the idea is to finish the war, and I would suggest send some better weapons, some missiles that'll go farther so they can get the supply lines to Russia. Today, though, in Kherson, with the Russian government saying that they're going to be withdrawing from there, I mean, in a way that's good news, but got to be careful. They have also started putting defenses around Crimea and digging in. So I would suggest for any negotiations, probably won't start till Ukrainians are looking at Crimea and ready to take it. And that's when the rubber will hit the road, as far as I'm concerned. Can Putin get through power by succeeding the territory that he's gotten in Ukraine and giving it back to Ukraine, but keeping Crimea? I have no doubt he could. They'll spin it in any way. They'll say special operation. Ukraine has been denazified, and it's also been desatanized, because they were saying that they're a bunch of Satanists in Ukraine. So I don't know if any of you guys watch the Russian War Monitor. It's the media people in Russia and what they have to say. There's some brutal things that they have said. It's closed captioned. It's in Russian, but you can read in English. And they're the ones driving this war. It'll be up to them to put the spin on it for Putin to save face, I guess. Everybody's worried about Putin saving face. But you know what the fucking fact is? Nobody told Putin to go in there. Everybody's saying, well, NATO forced him to. No, NATO did not. That's a grown-up country. He's a grown-up man. There should be no way that NATO or the U.S. and stuff forced him to do this. I mean, there's an argument about NATO increasing their presence along the line and stuff. That's one thing. But Russia has lost a lot of their reputation in the world as they were coming into the economy and the global economy, and they have gotten rid of, I hate to say this, over 70,000 soldiers. I mean, 70,000 going up to 75,000 plus of their soldiers. That's a huge, huge loss of youth, of older people who were conscripted, of people from society. So as far as the war being worth it, no, it wasn't. I really wish that we would have had better negotiations at the start. So there's that. But Ukrainians have been suffering over this war too as well. There's blame on both sides, but most of the blame is Putin came into Ukraine with his army. Thought 3 days or a week or 2 weeks he would have it under control. They did it the Russian way. They supplied money to double agents in the Ukraine government and their spy service, and son of a gun, the Ukrainians took the money, but they didn't give their country to Russia. So that's quite a Russian thing to do, to be honest. So, what does President Zelensky of Ukraine have to say about this, about the withdrawal of troops from Kherson? Well, Christiane Amanpour had him on her program, and you get to hear his reply.
I'll try to answer in a way that doesn't give you an answer, to be honest. Because these planned military actions, they are discussed in a small circle, but then they're executed in silence. And I really want to have an unpleasant surprise for the enemy and not something they are prepared for. So I'd like to apologize. But at any rate, our people and your public need to know that we're working on some very serious steps with a positive outcome for the citizens of Ukraine and all those communities that support peace in Ukraine.
So part of the problem that the Russians have to withdraw from Kherson is because of their supply chain. So Russian efforts to repair the Crimean Bridge continue, but it's unlikely to be fully operational until at least September of 2023. On November 8th, the road bridge was due to be closed to allow the movement and an installation of a 64-meter span. 3 more spans will be required to replace the damaged road sections. Although Crimean officials have claimed these additional spans will be in place by the 20th of December, a briefing provided to President Putin of Russia added that works to the other carriageway would cause disruption to road traffic until March of 2023. Replacement of the damaged rail bridge has been contracted for completion by September of 2023. Although Russia's deputy prime minister stated the repair timeline would be expedited. One track is open, but rail transport remains restricted. Repair activity will be heavily dependent on weather conditions through the winter months. The Crimean bridge attack by the Ukrainians has disrupted Russian logistics, supplies for Crimea and southern Ukraine, reducing Russia's ability to move military equipment and troops into the areas by rail or road. The damage to the bridge, the recent attack on the Black Sea Fleet in Sevastopol, and the probable withdrawal from Kherson all complicate the Russian government's ability to paint a picture of military success. This is for an update on Ukraine, November 9th of this year, from Defense. So let's get back to nuclear. Is there any way Putin would drop a nuclear or tactical bomb in Ukraine? Well, it's always a possibility, yes. He has implied that he won't. Let's take him at his word. However, all the other countries, and even China and Iran, who have a do not use nuclear weapons first mantra, it's just Russia and the United States that don't. The United States is, if they get in a war with the nuclear nation, they can use nuclear bombs. And Russia has it, of course, for their territory. They will use it. But Iran and China do not have first strike policies yet. They have nuclear weapons. Pakistan as well. North Korea is working on it. So let's just say Russia dropped the bomb. Where are we at? If I was a Ukrainian soldier out there, or the general, I would start taking all my troops and everything, and we're going to Moscow. I would just start bombing the heck out of it with the missiles that you have. Would they get there? I don't know. But, I mean, do you see that there would be an attitude, in my opinion, that people would want to do that? The main thing, though, is I think that Russia would get spanked hard. I believe that if they drop the bomb, that will be the end of Russia. Not only the Ukrainians, I think maybe the Chinese would come in, the Americans or NATO. I think that would be the end of Russia. You know what I mean? After all these hundreds of years, Russia would be done. That would be a great atrocity. And it would, just my feeling on it. Of course, you can't go by feelings. They have nuclear weapons. But so my question to you is, if you have a bully and they have a bigger, say they got a big gun. Do you give in to the bully? I suppose you would if your family's at stake. However, they're going to keep bullying. So how do you push back a bully? The Ukrainians have done quite well. And the Russian troops, if you've seen some of the Russian podcasters on YouTube talking about Russia, there seems to be more angst and more people wanting Russia to just stop this. This has been an incredible, brutal war. There's just people lost on both sides. Civilians have been killed. Babas and Guidos have had their homes and farms destroyed. And where are we at now? We have other things in this world going on right now. We have the conflict in Iran. People are rising up. We have in Haiti. People are rising up. There's a lot of war. We're very good at starting conflicts. You know, we're not so good at ending them. I hope we can. I really do. Other than that, let us hope there's no nuclear war. We don't want to see that. It's frosty outside where I live right now. I'll get back to doing some more talking about Canada and Europe and the States. Of course, the States just had their midterms. Yay! The social drama that is the United States. But they're our next door neighbor, and we appreciate them. Till next time, take care. This has been North of 48.